We're back.
Here we are.
So
Yay.
last time when we were talking about love, boy, we took that one all over the map, but I think it was still good. We still came to a good place with it. Um, we mentioned repair and that being so important in relationships. So, any thoughts so far on
I was just gonna be like, no, but
that?
obviously that's not why we're here. Um, yeah, I got a bunch of thoughts on repair, probably similar to having a bunch of thoughts on love. I know I was reading a book called The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate, and I actually had to put it down because it was freaking me out about like the impact women and like moms have on psychological growth, well-being, regulation, all that. And I put it down, and then like a month later, I picked it up, and pretty much the chapter it led me into is about the impact and power of repair. So I'm like, of course I put it down right before it told me like it's okay to be human. That's the purpose of repairs. And it also went into detail about like what repairs do for our kids or in any relationship. And I think it's really important just as like a baseline from like a parental sense, given, don't have kids, so you can weigh on that one. But I think it gives us permission to be human. Like, if you never see your parent repairing with you when they hurt your feelings or when they do something wrong, that's the modeled behavior. So rather than taking accountability yourself or repairing or trying to actually protect the love or whatever that might look like, we just try to protect our egos instead. So I think repair is foundational when it comes to love and relationships and just kind of permission to be human. What do you think?
I love that because I have so many thoughts. First of all, I want to be perfect. And I used to think that my desire to be perfect was because I was raised in a religious household where the messages were that Jesus was perfect and that you're supposed to strive to be like Jesus, but you're human, so you're never going to be perfect. And I was
Right.
like, well, this is a bullshit setup. So you're giving me a goal that you're saying is impossible to reach. And
Welcome
I
to
guess I know, right? Um, so, but then I started working with people more and I realized that it seems to be just innate in people to want to be perfect. Many people who had no affiliation with any religion also had the same desire to be perfect. And some people really struggle with perfectionism and wanting to be perfect. And uh, that's a whole other subject matter, which
next time,
we
right?
can save for another date. Um, but especially when it comes to parenting, I want to be perfect because I don't want to mess my kids up. That's what everybody
Mhm.
says. Like, well, people who are super aware say things like that. And I think the idea of repair mattering so much in parenting is a big relief. And the other thing I want to say about that is what I've learned as a parent is that whatever works for child rearing also works in your romantic relationship. And therefore, it could also translate into business leadership or
Mhm.
relationships and any other friendships. So, repair is important essentially across the board. And many of the principles of parenting are important across the board. For example, people need praise.
Mhm.
Children need praise. Children have to be praised. People need to be praised. Your partner needs to be praised. Your friends they don't necessarily need it, but they certainly appreciate it, and it
Mhm.
certainly helps a lot in a relationship. So,
Oh,
and then at work, your employees need to be recognized. There need to be incentives and uh, things put in place where people feel as though they're being valued. And these principles, again, just emphasizing, kind of go across the board. They're true in any relationship.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm gonna even throw a twist in here
Oh, I
that I
can't
think
wait.
uh repair is most important in the relationship that we have with ourselves.
Oh, God, you're so
I
good
know.
at that.
I
You know
did it.
what? So true.
Think about it, right? Like
Yeah.
here we are, these like unconscious being called children, running around completely dysregulated, having the time of our lives. Woohoo, right? And we just pick up crumbs along the way of this is okay, this isn't okay, this is how the world works. And we all know that like criticism weighs what, like 5 times heavier than positive reinforcement. So
hmm
we
I don't
tend
know if
to,
we all know that, but thank
well, in
you.
case you
That's
didn't
true.
know that, fun fact. Uh, but one of my favorite questions to ask when I'm doing like a conference is like, by a show of hands, who here tends to be the harshest and hardest on themselves and anyone else in their life? And like clockwork, every single person hand always goes up.
Yeah.
And, it's been getting me thinking about like motivation in a way,
Mm.
in that like we learned to motivate ourselves by beating ourselves up, by stressing ourselves out, by not believing in ourselves, right? And I think part of that does connect to repair because we never like completed the circle. Like, okay, we made a mistake, but we need to be perfect. We can't be human, right? Because being perfect means we don't get in trouble. Being perfect means we don't get hurt. But that's obviously not true because there's plenty of people who struggle with perfectionism and still get hurt and like suffer.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually more important to learn to repair with yourself so that you can embody the love that you crave first and foremost, because we can only receive a depth of love that we can actually feel towards ourselves, but to also foster like a space of compassion and growth, because no one likes growing in like a pressurized container of perfection. There's way more innovation and capability when we have space to experiment and explore to see what works for us. But if we're, holding ourselves to such harsh standards and there's no room for wiggle room, because if we do screw up, we're gonna get that harsh inner critic, why try? Why grow? Right?
Yeah. I remember, not to keep talking about kids, but I remember reading this analogy where they were saying if you had to choose a daycare for your kids to go to, so you're touring daycares, and one of the daycares says, um, we really like to foster independence and help the kids make their own decisions and learn and grow through their own mistakes. And we really just are trying to be guides and supports for the kids. And then
Mm.
you go to another daycare and they say, we're very serious about discipline. If the, we want to have a straight line and we want them to listen on the first time. And we have strict routines that we withhold or maintain. Um, which daycare sounds more appealing? Which one do you want to send your kids to? And
Number one. Yeah.
obviously, number one is the better option. Yet, the way that we treat ourselves is more or less number two.
Maybe that's because we forgot or don't know how or not even aware that we need to repair with ourselves, that we need to forgive ourselves for things we didn't know before we learned them. Like that's my thing. The thing I hate about hindsight being 2020 is everyone always goes, I should have known. Well, if you would have known, you wouldn't have done it. So clearly, like you shouldn't have, because if you could have, you would have, right?
Mm,
Like it just we're so scared to be vulnerable. We don't know how to handle these things that like we just try to protect and avoid and distract. And I think that is why we struggle with so much anxiety and depressions, because we're not willing to do what is innately human. Like be imperfect and allow yourself to live.
I'm over
Oh,
here thinking, well, hell, I can't help but be imperfect.
but you're perfectly
But it's the
imperfect.
repair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, all right. So let's think of repairing inside, like repairing your relationship with you, right? What would that even look like? What do you think?
Well, like anything, I think the first step is awareness. So being
Great.
aware when I'm being critical and harsh with myself, being aware when what I'm doing internally isn't helpful, which I think is a good word to focus in on a little bit, because I think as humans, we tend to get into this black and white way of thinking of like, this was wrong and this was right. And
Right.
first of all, as a therapist, I've sort of tossed wrong and right out the window
Oh yeah.
because it's so everything's so freaking gray. I mean, a serial killing's probably wrong. I think
Probably. Probably.
as far as
Likely.
like, there's a few things that I can say aren't
All the
and
line.
best
Yeah.
aren't good. Um, but most of the things I think are so gray. And when we're thinking about what we're doing and how we're doing it, we're thinking about it in terms of, I didn't do this right or I messed this up. And it's more like, is that helpful? Is this helpful? Am I helping myself by going down this road? And I think more often than not, we would probably notice that our thought patterns aren't really that helpful.
No, to the point, like one of the things I have my clients do is like when they have a harsh inner critic, I make them write down their thoughts. And
Mm,
that tends to be pretty impactful because I'll ask them to read them to me at the next session. And either they are willing to, they read two and they're crying, or they wrote three down, burned the paper, and they're like, I'm done with it. Because we realize how mean, just really evil we are towards ourselves. And to your point, like I think the first place is awareness. But I think the second thing, which I learned in through Kristen Neff's work on compassion, is like connecting with common humanity. Like
I
she
do
says
love
that
her work, by the way. Just kind of throw that out
she says that self-compassion is mindfulness, self-kindness, and common humanity. And if you go to Kristen Neff's website, you can even take a self-compassion quiz to see where you are within the different elements. But I remember thinking about the common humanity one and being like, who doesn't fail? Who doesn't get hurt? Who doesn't suffer? And like, those are literally no one, like everyone experiences that stuff in life. Like, no one can escape it. The depth you expose yourself to, I think you have a bit of control over based on how you want to live. Like, if you want to live a big, bold life and you want to make an impact, you want to build a business, you're going to experience a lot of uncomfortable emotions. Like, you're going to be imperfect. You're going to suffer. Like, that's going with it. If you want to hide under a rock, you'll mitigate some of it, right? But these elements of being human that we all try to avoid are going to be there. So why are we beating ourselves up for being what we are? It's like being mad at a dog for sniffing a butt. It's just what they do, you know? It's just what they do. Like if
there.
my dog didn't go up to another dog at a dog park and sniff their butt, I'd be like, what's wrong? Is your nose not working? Because it's abnormal for dog behavior.
There's two things that I tell my clients to try to help them to be able to be more compassionate with themselves. And one is to imagine their inner child. Like, would you talk to 10-year-old you this way? Would you talk to 5-year-old you this way? And isn't that part of the problem? Like, whoever was talking to those two weren't maybe being the best, most nurturing, loving, supportive people. So
Going back to the repair importance with parents. Continue.
yeah. And then the other thing I say is what would you tell your best friend?
Right.
Most of the time, we would never talk to our best friend the way that we talk to ourselves.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, it's really hard still for people to think about, okay, how do I comfort myself? How do I, what do I actually am thinking of a client I was just talking to today. She has some legal stuff going on, and she had to go do a deposition, and she said some things in the deposition that she regretted saying, and she was like, now I've probably screwed up the entire thing, and this is it's going to hurt the case, and if this doesn't end up working out, it's my fault. And I
Mm.
was like, okay, I know you well enough that I know you probably didn't screw up that bad, first of all.
Right. Right.
um but then, so what do we tell ourselves in those moments if thinking about my best friend or thinking about my inner child isn't working? How do we repair with ourselves?
Ooh, well, I feel like this word came up last time, and I have a feeling you're gonna hate it.
Oh,
And
great.
I feel like everyone else is gonna hate it too, because I didn't like it either. But surrender.
Oh, I love the word surrender,
Oh,
actually.
sweet.
I've
Yeah,
really been embracing it so much more with my anxiety.
good
I
for
mean,
you,
Gabor
dude.
Mate says I shouldn't even say my anxiety, but okay,
That's
whatever.
true.
The symptom of anxiety that I experience.
I understand. Yes. Good verbiage. I will report to Gabor.
Thank
Uh,
you.
no, but truly, like, if you can't connect with that inner child or you're struggling, like, to your point, like, is this helpful? If it's not, then why do I want to continue it? Why am I so, I think that's like we have to talk to ourselves. Like the repair process starts, yes, through awareness. And if you can't get to compassion, get curious why. Like, what are you getting by being so mean and beating yourself up? Most people, when I ask them, like, how does your inner judge and bully serve you? They initially they say it doesn't. I'm like, hold on, actually think about it, because you wouldn't keep doing it if it didn't have a positive impact to some degree, and it regulates their behavior. That's literally the number one reason people tell me why they beat themselves up, is to control and manage their behavior. And if they don't, they fear they won't be able to regulate their behavior. Isn't it worth experimenting to figure that out though? Like maybe, just maybe, you could get the same result by being kind to yourself, by believing in yourself, by learning how to actually inspire yourself. Maybe you could be motivated by loving yourself. Like when I think about repair with myself, because I had a huge perfectionist, but primarily people pleaser tendency, I always lived by everyone else's standards. I never knew what was okay with me unless I was just completely resentful and angry. But like being exhausted and burnt out was like, oh yeah, that's life. That's what happens because my whole purpose is to serve everyone else, and that means I'm okay. And as I've grown and become a coach and gone through the whole thing, um, a huge part of that was like learning to be clear about the standards I want to live by. Like, what does it mean to me to be a good person? If someone said something about me, if I did something that someone was upset by, would I be able to stand by that behavior? Like, for instance, people tell me all the time I'm too direct. I don't agree with them, but I validate their experience and I apologize for how my directness hurt them. I'll even take accountability for their pain because I don't have like pride doesn't bind me like that. Like I don't care. I'd rather be connected than like, well, technically that's you interpreting me that way. So you're the one hurting. Like that doesn't do us any good. But I want to be a person, and like the standards I live by is I want to be someone who acknowledges pain. And even if I don't feel like it was my direct doing, but more their interpretation, I will still take accountability for it and repair because it's the standard of who I want to be. It's who I want to live by. I'm not saying I did something wrong. I'm saying I see you're in pain, and that's what matters. and I want to repair that. And like the same thing goes with me. If I don't live by my own standards, I want to understand why. Like where did I go wrong? Where did I lose my sense of self? Where was I not curious? And then once I kind of learn, be like, okay, this is uncomfortable, but you're human. It's gonna happen. Like, feel what you need to feel. All of your emotions are perfectly okay. Take a walk, do whatever you need, and we'll try better or try harder next time with this new information. That's all we can do. And like that's where the compassion, I think, comes for me. It's like that, I guess for like that inner repair, it's awareness, acceptance, and compassion to me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then I wonder,
Hmm.
does that translate to a relationship repair? I would I would think that it does.
I think it does, and I think it has more steps.
Yeah.
Like, I think awareness is multi-directional, like awareness up for yourself that there's something to repair for sure, but also like awareness of the person you're repairing with. Like there have been friends in my life who like are the definition of hurt people, you
Yeah.
know? Or like when they're hurt, if I've done something and they were hurt by my behavior, they wouldn't accept an apology. They literally would just try and hurt me to the depth they felt hurt. And it wasn't until they did hurt me that they felt validated, right? So if you're trying to repair with someone, repair is still vulnerable for a lot of people. And you're going into a circumstance with someone who's going to hurt you back. I think it's really important that you're aware of who you're repairing with and what they're capable of so that you can protect yourself, your connection to yourself, and repair with intention for you. And that's the piece I actually think is important, is the intention.
Hmm.
Is like we think we're repairing a lot of times for the relationship, which is true. But if we're repairing for them, then we're subconsciously expecting something from others, likely like a mutual accountability or something along those lines.
Okay, I have some thoughts. I definitely agree that repair in a relationship is a little bit more complex. Obviously, we're introducing another person, not just ourselves.
Yeah, people,
That makes it a little bit more complicated right there.
yeah.
Uh, but I think that if I had to summarize what repair within relationships looks like, to me, it's more about understanding where the other person is coming from. And I think you kind of nailed that when you were talking about apologizing if you've hurt someone's feelings for being too direct.
Mhm.
Because obviously, I mean, I know you, so I can say obviously it's not your intention to hurt someone's feelings. I know you well enough that that's never your intention.
Mhm.
Um, and obviously sometimes intentions don't matter as far as like, well, my feelings still fucking got hurt. So,
Right, right.
we still we're in the same place. Um, but then I think, and you mentioned putting the ego aside, which is incredibly difficult, especially when we feel wounded, or feel attacked or threatened in any way. That's our ego's job, is to protect us. So,
Yeah,
um, putting that aside is almost counterintuitive. And I'm not even saying to put it aside completely, just enough that you can hear someone out and try to understand where they're coming from. And we're not going to tell them they're right or wrong. We're just saying, okay, I can see how you would have felt that way, essentially. And that's I think what you were describing with
yeah,
your, yeah.
yeah, 100%. I'm like, I can totally understand how you interpreted this as blank. And I'm very sorry. that you suffered because of that. That was never my intention. I hate that that's what you thought. Like doubling down on it almost because I have no interest in hurting people. I have interest in helping people. But I also accept that people, it's a game of telephone out here. We are always like misinterpreting, under communicating. Like it's just so distorted that it's impossible not to offend someone or hurt someone's feelings. So like it's not that I don't try not to anymore. I've just it's like the same thing to get away from people pleasing. I had to accept if I want to be able to be any part of me, that will disrupt people. People won't always like that. And rather than not allowing myself to be myself, I'd rather repair for where my authenticity hurt their feelings, which ironically, repair actually strengthens relationships.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like the other aspect of it. And like, you brought up how like it's our ego's job to protect us. Totally agree, which is also why I think we started the conversation with the importance of repairing within first. Because if you enter into a vulnerable repair conversation in an unstable space where your inner bully is just ready and waiting to wrangle you and beat the hell out of you, what do you think is going to happen? You know? So I think there's like the pre-game to repair and the post-game. So it's way more complex because humans are complex, but I think the
God
pre-game
damn, we
to
just
repair,
always have to be so complicated, don't we?
no, it's so cool and so frustrating all at the same time.
Such a mixed bag of emotions.
But to your point, like repair within you first to like create a sense of security or at least stability. And then I know I'll be curious your insights. For me, when I enter a repair, I try to start by being like aware of what that person is capable of in general,
Mm.
what to expect back from them so I can protect the connection because that's a big reason why I'm repairing. And then normally I try and take accountability to start because I think that that disarms people in repairs. Like they're waiting to be attacked and people love to be defensive. So if you address, like, I recognize that I communicate in a direct way and you are not the first person that will hear me or the last person that will hear me and misunderstand my intentions, but that's still your truth and your reality. And that was never my intention to hurt you in any way. And I want to learn how I did and understand it because I'm not okay with the fact that I hurt you. And I recognize I did that. And I'm sorry. I don't understand it yet. And I want to, but I also got hurt in the process. And I would love if we can have a conversation about that.
Wow, that was so good. I don't think I sound that good. I do agree that taking accountability is super important. In fact, I would argue we can't have repair without having accountability.
No,
As far as like at least not a repair that's going to actually solve something.
right.
So in an argument, generally speaking, it's not one person's fault. Maybe one person did something that triggered the other and then it just blew up from there. But that response, that blow up is still my responsibility. If I'm the person blowing up, that's still my responsibility. So always, I think accountability is an important piece. And you saying, I'm curious and I want to hear about your perspective, but I also want to honor my own feelings and
Mhm.
make sure that I express that I too was hurt through this experience.
Right.
So I like that. You use like the little sandwich
Unintentionally.
idea.
Trust me, this was a trial and error learning curve with a lot of discomfort and suffering along the way. But the the thing people don't talk about when you mess up like that, you don't make the same mistake twice when it hurts.
Mm,
You learn way hard, like way quicker, like, oh crap, I forgot to send out this email. You're always going to send out that email if you get in trouble for not sending it out. Like you're always going to remember the thing that you made the mistake on because it feels so icky. I definitely messed up repairs a million times before I got them right, but the ick helps weirdly guide me now. And again, being aware of like who you're repairing with, knowing your boundaries, like that emotional like stable space, because most people aren't emotionally mature, like
Yeah.
protecting that space and being aware of that when I'm still in it is important. Like I have been very close before in different interactions to someone pushing me over the edge, and I can have a loud bark, but I don't want to. That's not who I want to be. Like it doesn't align for me. So like it doesn't matter who they're being. It's not a good reason for me to, live by their standards or hurt them back. Like that just doesn't make sense to me. So having that radar on your own capacity, I think is important. Like if the whole purpose of repair is to repair and reconnect, you don't want to go into a repair and do more damage. So if you're not aware of yourself through that, you're flirting with fire. Just saying.
Yeah.
You know,
Um,
yeah.
I wandered into thinking about repairs with my children, and I feel like accountability is so important, particularly with children, because children are so likely to take full responsibility and feel as though the entire thing is their fault.
Mhm.
And I think it's really important for us as adults to teach our children that we are human, we mess up, our emotions are not their responsibility.
Mhm.
I should, as an adult in an ideal world, I don't like the word should. Should represents what it would be like in an ideal world.
Right.
Um, in an ideal world, I would be able to regulate my emotions as an adult all the time. And so I wouldn't have any of these issues. But, here I am as this imperfect person that gets really irritated as hell when you and your sister are arguing constantly.
Yeah.
So owning that and explaining to my kids, like, look, I got frustrated. I lost my temper. That was my fault. That's not on you.
Right.
Um,
I think it's very loving of you.
I mean, I'm I've told them before too, if I could be perfect for you guys, I never wanted to be perfect so much for anyone in my life. If I could
I
be
believe it.
perfect for them, I would do it. Even Sebastian, I love him, but he's cool. He can handle my
Different.
flaws.
It's just different.
He's fine. The
So,
children, on the other hand, they deserve perfection. But the
yeah.
one thing I tell my clients too that comforts me is that if I were perfect, that would cause my children a whole other complex because
Oh,
then they would think that they also needed to be perfect. And that would be a whole issue. So, and then also they wouldn't know how to deal with other people in the world who aren't perfect. So I'm just
and
really helping them,
you're
with my
helping.
flaws.
You are. Like you're giving them permission to be imperfect.
Yeah.
Like think about it. Like we joke, and the whole pizza for breakfast thing, but
Mm-hmm.
you always try to apologize to me for your messiness. And what do I
Oh, yeah.
always do is like your messiness is permission for me to be messy too. Like I don't fear judgment because we're in this messy, real world trying to do our best together and communicating through it. Like it's going to be imperfect, but like it gives you so much freedom to live, which is like why we're technically here to live, not to like hide or make money or any of that stuff, but to like enjoy our existence. And I think you're also like like teaching them full circle. Like when your kids are, I was going to say teen years, but we all know how girls can be in their teens. Let's go like young 20s, okay? If they do something that hurts your feelings and you've regularly modeled repair for them, the chances that they'll be able to repair with you are much greater than had you been that perfect mom the entire time, right?
Yeah,
And
I love when they come to repair with me already. It's so cute.
I love that. And the last thing I'll say is, there was one night I had a long day. I was very dysregulated. And Scott said to me, he's like, what would you tell our kids, like, if they were existed and they were around and you were in this dysregulated state? Like, don't you think you'd be hurting their development or something? He was just curious about it. And I was like, no, I would model dysregulation, which is part of being human, and then I would communicate and demonstrate how to get back into regulation because I don't expect my kids to always be regulated. I can't even always be regulated. So it's not about modeling perfection. It's about modeling the foundation of connection. And I think repair is cornerstone of that.
Oh, that's such a beautiful ending. Well done. Uh, yeah, I think, okay, just real quick before we go. So we said awareness, accountability,
Acceptance, compassion.
acceptance, compassion. Okay, I think acceptance and compassion work well within a relationship too. Having compassion for the other person's experience and
Mhm.
then acceptance that this is how it went and how are we going to move forward next time or try to move forward next time.
And accepting like you're human and they might perceive a different experience. It doesn't make your experience wrong or their experience wrong. It just means like that's life. People perceive
Yeah.
things differently.
I do tell my clients that anytime you get feedback from someone, you have to filter it through who they are.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Like, oh my God, 100%.
Oh, maybe we could talk about that again later.
Add it to we got perfectionism, we got, what is it? Filtering other people's
Filtering.
feelings. Yeah, God,
Yeah.
filtering, huge topic. Talk about like autonomy to create your life. Filtering.
All right.
But yeah, I think for repairs, I think we have to start within ourselves because if we
Yeah.
don't create that like emotional stability, we heighten the chances of needing like a double repair by messing up the first one because we weren't stable within ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things I was thinking about when you were saying repair with yourself first, because that's kind of important too if you're going to take accountability for anything. You
A
know,
hundred.
if you're already all upset and you don't even understand all of that that's going on there, you haven't processed that internally, and then when you start to talk to the other person about it, you're not going to be able to accurately talk about it, and that's not going to help the situation. So definitely processing internally first, I think, is really important, which would include having grace for yourself, having compassion for yourself,
Mhm.
all of that, so that you're not going in already in defense mode, which
For sure.
again is normal. It's a normal response, being defensive when we feel attacked. But if we're going into it with the idea that this wasn't all my fault, but I did have a role in it, then we maybe could be less defensive.
100%. Like, what's the point of repair? So if you keep the goal in mind and just kind of come up with a strategy for you and allow yourself to be imperfect along the way, you'll figure it out. But I don't know, avoiding it doesn't really do much.
Oh God.
Experimenting it does at least strengthen bonds because at the bare minimum, whether you get it right or wrong, you're showing the other person, I care enough to try.
Yeah. Oh, that's
So,
so beautiful. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what the heck I'm saying half the time, but I love that it's beautiful. I'll
Yeah.
take it.
Don't worry. The other week, my client said, "You told me that." And I was like, "You think I remember everything I say?" It's like, I have no idea what I say half the time.
I know. God, we could have a whole other conversation about thinking about what you say, but maybe that one can be off the podcast.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, hopefully, we said some useful things today that you can take with you and use. If you have questions, leave them for us, we'd be happy to answer them. And we'll see you next time.
Can't wait.